The NPA's Investigative Directorate intends to appeal the 24.9 million rand fraud and corruption Nulane judgment. Last month, the High Court in Bloemfontein acquitted former Free State Department of Agriculture official Dr. Limakatso Moorosi. The 5 co-accused who had applied to be discharged were also found not guilty. The case relates to millions of rands paid by the Free State Department of Agriculture to Nulane Investments between 2011 and 2012. The money was purportedly paid to Nulane to conduct a feasibility study for the Free State Province's flagship Mohoma Mobung project. This was on the basis that Nulane had unique skills to perform the work at hand.
The investigating Directorate prosecution team have studied through the judgment handed down by the Bloemfontein High Court on the 21st of April. After consideration of the judgment, the investigating director has taken the decision to appeal the judgment. The details of the reasoning around the appeal will thus be ventilated at a press briefing to be held next week. Further, the investigating director is also quite concerned with the outcome of that particular judgment. However, she emphasizes that we shall not be deterred by that particular judgment and will continue to ensure that we prosecute state capture cases and other high-profile cases with the vigor as well as meticulous detail they so deserve. Additionally, the NPA Investigating Directorate has enrolled about 34 cases, and of those 34 cases, it pertains to 203 accused, which also has about 65 entities so concerned. Those are stats as of the end of March 2023. Furthermore, the NPA Investigating Director is also concerned with the UAE's decision to not extradite the Gupta brothers, more particularly because we believe that everything necessary was done operating through the SA Central Authority and also in compliance with the treaty between the two countries in order to then furnish those documents.
All right, so let's bring in legal analyst Mphumelelo Zikala to weigh in on the decision by the NPA to appeal the Nulane judgment. Mphumelelo, good afternoon. Thanks for your time here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to you, and also good afternoon to your viewers.
Let's start off with what's just emerged in the Bloemfontein High Court. We also heard Judge Gusha saying that the state failed to prove any common purpose in relation to the alleged Nulane fraud. Are you of the view that the NPA now has enough evidence perhaps to prove this fraud? How would you weigh in on that?
You've got to remember that there's no new evidence that can be introduced. Once the state has closed this case at the end of the state case, that's the end. There's no new evidence that can come in. So you simply have to go to the SCA and try and convince the SCA and say, provided on what you have provided or the evidence that has been there, there's enough questions that needs to be raised that needs to come to the court that will enable the accused person to then come back and say, this is the elements of the evidence that you are going to provide so that we can be able to prove that you are not guilty of the crimes that you are accused of. Now, if there's certain elements or certain evidence that has been excluded by virtue that it was collected in an unprofessional manner or in a manner in which is not in line with how evidence ought to be collected in our courts, then obviously that evidence ought to be considered by our court, and it cannot be used in the criminal liability of any individual. So it's up to the SCA to then decide in terms of saying the evidence which is excluded, was it excluded in an appropriate manner, or was it a mistake for that evidence to be excluded? If it was, then the direction would be, as the accused, go back and state your answer or state your responses to the allegations that's been leveled against you. However, if the SCA is of the opinion that the evidence was not collected in the appropriate manner in which evidence ought to be collected in, hence it should not be considered by the court, then unfortunately then 174 applications should proceed, because you cannot then go to court and ask the court to do anything else.
Mphumelelo, as we look at the aspects having to be considered for the appeal to be successful, previously you were of the view that the prospects of success in overturning the Nulane ruling is slim. I wonder then, in view of what you previously echoed, how does the state begin to focus on avoiding a repeat of this, perhaps for future cases, in regards to what you've just echoed?
It is proper investigation and proper collection of evidence and making sure that the evidence in which you have collected can then be used at court. So do not ride on the notion of saying that anything that has to do with the Gupta brothers is correct. you still have to make sure that there are certain criminal elements and all the elements of causation of criminality has got to be there. So there's got to be an act which is unlawful. The intent to defraud or to conduct a criminal element must also be there. Causation of the causal link between the act and the criminal element and the proceeds that have been received must also be able to connect. If you don't have that as the core basis of the elements of the crime then which we need to prove, then definitely the court is going to say you don't have a case, we're not going to consider or render a guilty verdict against these individuals. It then goes back to the quality and the quantity of the evidence, especially when it comes to the state capture matters. A lot of time has elapsed between now and between the alleged stage of the act being conducted and when they're being prosecuted. Then the most important question would be, do you still have the relevant witnesses who are going to be eyewitnesses or people that can be able to render viva voce evidence? Do you have the documentation, or can you be able to follow the line of the money from the government coffers to where it was used or to the accused bank accounts? If you have that, then you're going to be successful. But if you don't have those things and you're simply hunching on things that cannot be proved, or the court will not consider things which are correct, then definitely you are wasting your time. And this type of 174 applications being successful is something which is going to be a regular basis if the state does not pull up the socks and make sure that they are prosecuting these cases properly.
Mphumelelo, based on the Investigative Directorate intending to appeal this ruling, perhaps as we shine a spotlight on the work of the NPA to date, how would you weigh in on whether the outcome of this case would have any bearing on the NPA and its ability at large to prosecute other state capture cases? What's been reflected on that front? What concerns arise as well?
I think it must be looked at, it must be a case-by-case basis. We cannot say simply the losing of one case it means that all state capture matters are going to be lost. It depends on the type of evidence and the manner of investigation that has taken place, which is going to enable you to go with a very strong case to court. But something which concerned me, especially even when the State Capture Commission was being conducted, was there was no formal request from the law enforcement agencies, which is your South African Police Service or SIU, your Hawks, or any other law enforcement agency that is there, to call them and say, come and present your case in this particular commission. Are you experiencing problems when it comes to investigations? If so, tell us now, because we do not want to spend 1 billion rands and 3 to 4 years doing this particular investigation and collecting this report that we're going to hand over to you. Meanwhile, we're handing over this report to a defective law enforcement agency, which will not be able to prosecute. The same can be asked with the NPA. They were supposed to be called to the State Capture Commission. Ask them a simple question. Are you experiencing problems in terms of prosecuting? If yes, what are those problems? Are the problems which have to do with administration, financial constraints, or is it capture that is taking place, so that you can be able to resolve? Because at the end of the day, we are not going to sit here, collect this information on your behalf. Law enforcement agencies are going to do their jobs. And when it comes to the prosecution, we are again stuck. So the type of problem that we are facing now in this type of Nulane case seems or talks about some of the systematic allegations that may be there, that maybe we do not go deep enough to the level of capture that is there. We do not drill deep enough in terms of asking ourselves, do we have an NPA which is capable of successfully prosecuting individuals? If that's the case, then we can continue. But if not, then we must come back and say, how do we change our rules? How do we change our strategy so that we have a successful NPA which is going to come back with convictions and not simply 174 discharges?
Mphumelelo, let's leave that conversation there. Thank you for your time. You're on the SABC legal analyst, Mphumelelo Zikala, weighing in.